Hey, it's Adam. Thanks so much for checking out the podcast. Apologies for the lack of recent episodes. It's been about a month-long gap. The reason being is that the recent episode I intended to release suffered a heavy bout of technical glitches, also known as audio drift, that wasn't worth trying to Frankenstein back together. Anyhow, really excited to introduce you to my guest today, Maceo Paisley. Met him here in Los Angeles through the design community. Really enjoyed our conversation, as it'll definitely be the first of many. Started the nonprofit Citizens of Culture here in Los Angeles. It's a nonprofit that develops critical thinking and emotional intelligence using art as a platform to open up important conversations about identity, relationships, and work. And has a physical space, new to, here in Chinatown in Los Angeles, hosting talking circles, art shows, installations, amazing space with amazing people. I had the pleasure of hosting tea ceremony there last week. Anyhow, I will include links to all of these in the description for the episode. So without further ado, I give you Maceo Paisley. So yeah, I'm excited to try this tea because I haven't really. I almost wish we had. Like maybe I'll ask Chance, the rapper, if I could just put a snippet of his song into this episode to just tie that together.
Yeah, he might say yeah.
He might say yes. So you just had a birthday.
Yeah.
You said it was your 34th.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. How was your 33rd year?
Pretty good. I think that a few years ago, I don't put the same amount of weight on the symbolism of the years as other people do.
Mm-hmm.
But I do appreciate, age ain't nothing but a number, to put it frankly.
Sure.
But I do appreciate the opportunity to acknowledge, a season cycle.
Yeah.
And I feel really grounded in my perspectives at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel just sure enough of things to speak confidently about my views on many different aspects of life, but still curious enough and frankly ignorant enough or naive enough to still see the world with a whole bunch of wonder. And I'm really excited about that sweet spot.
I think establishing, it sounds almost crude to say establishing and maintaining a sense of wonder in the world as a human, male, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I can relate to that. Of course, I have my own way of experiencing that, and when I met you at this event, which oddly enough was like one of the better networking experiences that I've had within the field of design, and was probably one of the last ones I had gone to, because I find that I don't put in that effort to go out and network for the purpose of maybe finding the next gig or finding the next role, that kind of thing. Instead, I go just to just to see how I could be of service, or how I can listen, or or connect with someone. Maybe it's a person who's going to be a parent, or someone who just doesn't want kids, or whatever that moment may be. I lately have been seeking inspiration that way, as opposed to like I'm going to go with this hidden agenda of going to see if I could land a gig or something. And you know, the thing that really struck me when I had met you in that context was it felt like there is this amazing aura of like this combo of like whimsy and immense groundedness. As someone who like maybe like I can only speak subjectively, but as someone who maybe emits an aura of groundedness, I always seek groundedness from other people, maybe because I'm actually not as secure as I may project myself to be. But there was a really amazing interplay of groundedness and like whimsy that like what magnetized me to you, like in that context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think about that a lot. And somebody was asking me last night. They were saying, are you ever impressed? Are you easily impressed? And I feel like I'm not easily impressed. Like I'm not impressed by the things people do necessarily. As a spike in relationship to how impressed I might be at a scoop of peanut butter. But in general, I keep I think a relatively high level of impressed about all things,
Sure.
that keeps me sort of fascinated with the world at large, like I think it's really cool that we figured out how to make peanut butter and tea and furniture.
And programs and
all of it. It's like
yeah.
we're as a species an anomaly, and when compared to other animals, the amount of leisure time, the closest thing in nature that I think I can analogize what we call creativity to is reproduction.
Yeah.
In the wild.
Yeah.
And it's almost as if we figured out how to extract the creative element from the reproductive process and apply it to other things, like finding food or hibernating, and then developing new areas of life that other animals don't experience, or we've constructed new areas of life, like work is one of the most fundamental parts of human life, and yet it's completely alien.
Banal, maybe.
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 Well, I say completely alien to the rest of the animal kingdom,
right?
Because there isn't a separation between. Oh, babe, I'll be back. I'm gonna go get some acorns, and I'll see you at 5:30.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure dinner's on the table.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, it's it seems as though from the outside looking in, that it's just a steady stream of sensation and choice and emotion, whereas human beings, we are really into cartographizing and measuring and mapping, which I think gave birth to all the cool things that we have. But when you say banal, it makes me think, one of my favorite quotes is, we couldn't measure what mattered, so we made what we could measure matter.
That makes me think of, I don't know who said it or where I even read it, but someone was pointing out, it's like, I don't know if people realize that we are controlled by the rectangle. Talking about in an abstract sense. We sleep on rectangles. We walk through rectangles. We drive in rectangles. We look at rectangles. We sit on rectangles, like so on and so forth. Like we're like our rectangle, you know. No one talks about our rectangle overlords.
That's funny because, you know, there's no real reason for it, right? Like it's not the strongest shape.
Yeah.
It's maybe just the one that was easiest to construct at the certain time in certain parts of the world.
Or to ship, or to move, or to control, you know, something.
Yeah. But you can't make a rectangle ship,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Like a raft doesn't... You can't... There's only so much you can transport with it. But I think that stuff is funny. I think human beings are fascinating, and I think I'm fascinating. I think you're fascinating. Children are wildly interesting to me because it seems like they're just unable, they haven't practiced covering up all the things that we have. And so I think we're just better performers, but maybe we're still kids in many ways, except for the relationship we have to our consequences in the world.
Sure.
Which is maybe what adulthood at its crux is about.
Yeah, adulthood being like the crutch of self-awareness or lack of self-awareness.
Or the idea that you could take responsibility for the impact of your actions is a really daunting one.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I felt a lot more secure when I knew that if something was overwhelming for me, I could ask my dad or my mom to help me or to take care of it. I could actually just throw my hands up. And I think that's the difference. The main difference I can see between adults and children is that adults is a sense of isolation in terms of like shared responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that isolation is what creates a social need for life partnership, you know, a social need for life partnership. I don't know what we might have done as like a more tribal.
Right. I mean, the structure may have been different, but the need may have still been the same. You know, maybe in like more forager culture or like hunter-gatherer. Like, okay, well, maybe the city is smaller. It's a smaller tribe or smaller village, and maybe the structure may be different. Maybe it's more like, you know, kibbutz style, and people are just sharing all the resources, all the homes, sharing the responsibilities in between kids. Maybe there aren't exclusive couples. Maybe there are polyamorous couples. Maybe everyone's just not in an incestuous way, but like in just who knows.
We're certainly at that time would be sharing the river and sharing the forest and sharing the boar and sharing the lion or the bison or whatever the indigenous meat was that we were eating, or the berries, right? So, you know, I think adulthood is like is one of those words that is like contextually different across cultures.
Yeah.
And comes with it its own, you know, particular set of responsibilities. In this particular one, I think it kind of means isolation. Like that's been my experience, that I'm trying to, because we started talking about my birthday, right? And so I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to, and I'm focusing on what it means to mature versus age, and what it means to be an adult and maintain a sense of wonder. and also unpack what adulthood means to me
Yeah.
in a way that is graceful and that I can accept, and in a way that I can identify with the definition.
Hmm.
A few years ago, I felt really like a really deep sense of grief. Like I was becoming older, and the things that I had accomplished in my life were not satisfactory for a person of my age.
Oh, yeah.
You know that conversation?
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, when I was 18, I could do XYZ, and people would say, it's really impressive, you're really bright for your age. And then when I was 24, people would say, you're really impressive or smart for your age. And when I was 29, people would say, you're really something impressive for your age. At a certain point, people stopped doing that.
Yeah.
That it just became expected that I was supposed to know everything that I knew.
Yeah.
That it was no longer worth celebrating or congratulating me for knowing whatever it is that I knew or had worked to know. And so I found myself in my late 20s looking for my next big thing that I could do earlier than I was expected to do it. Maybe I could win a Nobel Prize and be the youngest Nobel Prize winner. And people would say, wow, he's so young.
Yeah.
To have won a Nobel Prize.
Yeah.
And but it's just like these things, the tasks kept getting bigger. Like ridiculously big.
Like what?
I mean, like winning a Nobel Prize.
Okay. So
Or like, maybe I could go to the Olympics.
Right.
And people would say, wow, he's only been doing it for how long? So impressive for his age to just be so talented so young. And I found that what I was focusing on was, one, external validation, and two, youth.
Yeah.
Which either of those things are actually totally cool. We're human beings, but that's just what I noticed, and I was like, oh man. So I'm really interested right now in what it means to mature for me, and also what it means to mature for the human race to mature.
Yeah, that alone is a really huge topic. I feel like with every guest, we always glean on that I don't necessarily try and steer these conversations in any direction. There may be a few topics that I am inspired by, given the opportunity of sitting with someone. And, which is a fun segue. As I started to learn about you, again, we had our initial meeting, and then I don't think I saw you for possibly a year or two, until reaching out to you to share tea in Nutu, in your space. But in that interim time, there is this other relationship that goes on through the internet, and seeing like, what are you up to? What is he up to? What, who is he? What is he doing in the world? How is he being, it's just so funny to unconsciously measure a person through their output these days, for better or for worse.
Mm-hmm. And even when the for better could be for worse. You know what I mean? Like positively attributing qualities to someone that, as a result of what they publish.
Yeah.
How that even, like, I guess all I'm saying is to interrupt, is that I recognize that there is a performativity to online encounters.
Yes.
That I am comfortable with and familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm always trying to undermine the quality of performance that I can deliver with something that is vulnerable.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is premeditated,
Yeah.
but that doesn't mean, but I'm trying to unpack or separate premeditation from dishonesty.
Yeah.
Right? How can you be both premeditated, curated, and also vulnerable?
Yeah. I guess.
That's what my hope is for the stuff I do online.
Yeah.
It's like, sure, this is, I took 10 of these photos and I'm posting the one I like the best.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But in publishing any of them, there's something vulnerable.
Sure.
So the reason behind the photo at its inception should be something that adds value, at least in some way or another.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly for me, beyond aesthetic value.
Yeah.
Or in addition to, actually.
It's funny. I feel like I've come to a point right now. I think I started doing this finally in like February, after thinking about it for way too long. This may be the most vulnerable I've been publicly through this template, this medium, this container, if you will. Because, yeah, as you say, no matter what I am putting out there, let's say on Instagram, something like Instagram, I actually found myself to be using a platform like Facebook vulnerably, and I discovered that my community, my Facebook community, it's kind of funny, paradoxical.
That's because
label.
we're not digital natives.
Yeah, we're not digital
So we're
natives.
always doing like double speak of like,
Yeah.
is this part of reality?
Yeah.
And that's fair, but I think it's okay for us to be invested in the digital realm, I think.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Ask me again in 30 years.
Yeah,
I might give you a completely different answer.
I found that vulnerability on Facebook was actually not received. It didn't give me, not that I was seeking validation on Facebook through being vulnerable, but there was no like engagement or conversation. There are obviously different ways of communicating. It could be through a timeline, through a comment, through a private group, through the whatever. And so like pretty much a month ago now, I'm like, I don't want to give anymore or try and consume anything else from a platform like that. And so I've like left it at just Instagram, which I myself, perhaps, maybe artistically, I'm a more visually oriented person anyway. Especially as a learner, I'm probably more visually oriented, and more auditory as well. And but no matter what I'm putting out there on something like Instagram, there's always this curation. My visual mind is like seeking symmetry, and I'd like to spend more time learning more about astrology. I don't know if you're familiar, but I have this part of my cosmology is like there is an air of perfection, and I definitely see how I do that through whatever digital footprint. And all that to say that everything that I've seen and consumed and enjoyed or viewed that you've put out, except for actually getting your book, because that's a recent thing that you've done, is publish a book.
So yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, so I didn't have to. But yeah, so I wrote this book, which is called The Tao of Maceo. Ironically, next Sunday, I think you're traveling. But I'll be doing stuff around. Next Sunday, I'll be at Bloom and Plume Coffee.
Yeah.
Across the lake. I'll probably see Reese there. But the funny thing about Facebook is that I wouldn't have been able to write the book had it not for all my practice at learning how to communicate and receive feedback on my writing.
Yeah.
So it was like having an online test group
Yeah.
to where I could see what exactly was being responded to, my style of writing, the topics I selected, in as close to real time as the internet could allow.
Yeah, it's like the best editing.
Yep, too esoteric. No one responds.
Yeah.
Not within this sort of zeitgeist.
Yeah.
No one responds. Too angry. No one responds. Not angry enough. No one responds.
Too political.
Too political. No one responds. Political people respond. Don't like their response.
But is that awareness and that sort of is that laboratory? It's funny, I've been saying laboratory instead of laboratory. Is that laboratory?
That's great though. Say it like that because that's how the British say it, I believe.
Laboratory. And
also it highlights labor.
Labor, right.
So that's where you go to work.
Okay.
But is it laboratory or laborious?
Laborious, yeah.
100%. It was my engagement with social media, and that's the part where I always like to disclaim. I don't have a recreational use for social media, even though I don't have a recreational use for social media. But I do have a recreational disposition towards social media. So I don't engage in it for no reason, but I also don't take it seriously.
Yeah.
There are other things that I could do with my time if I were just bored. But I also don't think of it as, I don't honor it yet as reality. Like, I wouldn't be someone who could fully empathize with a term like cyberbullying. I don't put enough stock in what goes on in those environments to receive a comment online as real for me. But I totally see how there are people on the other side of the screen that would go to the extent to find out where someone else lives on the other side of the screen. And that fear is real. You know? Whenever I'm in an argument with someone online or whatever, a heated dialogue or whatever it is, or even a romantic exchange or whatever, a joke, I always just assume that they're like...
The best intentions?
No, they're setting it down on when they log off. And that's probably like my naivete. Because I'm like logging off. Like when the conversation gets too heated or just uncomfortable or boring or personal, I just log off. And then I go back to whatever I was doing, as opposed to like, there have been very few instances where I've thought about, something that was said online for a long time. But that's like, I think, not the common experience. It seems as though that's like been one of my learnings, and from being on Facebook, is realizing that, there's other people on the other side of the screen that are actual people. I have a larger number of Instagram followers and Facebook followers than I could comprehend. Actually, the significance of that number of actual people viewing anything that I would do in real life.
Yeah, the number becomes abstract at some point.
Yeah. Very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you have 900 friends on Facebook, you have 900 Instagram followers, I can't conceive of 900 people being interested in a single line of text that I might write.
Here's what's interesting, though, is that it's possible. I'm going to highlight the word possible. It's possible that 900 people at any point in time may have seen, liked, been interested in, or wanted to consume something, some image, a word, a sentence. There's this like whole other construct of like some reality or time construct where like maybe 1,100 people at some point liked something, and so they'd say, "Oh, I'll follow this person," but then as algorithms, update or are built or rebuilt over time, your shit does not show up on people's
Right.
feed anymore. So
Well, then
it's a
that's
really interesting.
that's a healthy reframe, and it
Yeah.
also makes me self-conscious, because then I would make it seem like that over like a 5-year period, I would have hoped that far more people would have at any given time of the day, but more than 1,100 people would be interested in the things that I'd say. Like if that's the way that I'm thinking about it, then now I go from, yeah, social media is not a real reflection of where people's interests are, to maybe I'm not important. And the things I say are not
Yeah.
important, which is like literally like that's the sort of paradigm of social media, right?
Sure.
Is that it's this wonderfully connective and validating space where you can find your other gardener people of whatever squash that you garden, and you can also find the person who gardens the exact same kind of squash that you garden so much better than you ever could, that you feel inadequate in your practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's both of those things, it's the giver and the taker,
Mm-hmm.
which is really just us, which is why I really love Taoism.
Mm-hmm. How did Taoism find you?
Pretty typical answer, Bruce Lee.
Uh-huh.
I, just like anybody else, was like fascinated by this guy who seemed to have superhuman abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd always been fascinated with, Western philosophy, actually. But I found out about Bruce Lee when I was probably 9 or 10.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was a 80s, 90s businessman, and in the early 90s, Japan started really kicking our butt. In 80s and early 90s, Japan started to become a real global competitor. And so in the corporate business world, they started to pull down these words like Kaizen, business management, which was like the way the Japanese business leaders managed their, teams, or
Kaizen being this, like, as far as I understand, like, always like driven by improvement,
yes,
self-improvement.
yes. And so, and then Bruce Lee. So the East had this crazy invasion, right? And it was, the greatest fighter in the world is Bruce Lee, and the businesses that are starting to take over, China is starting to become prominent, Japan is starting to become prominent on the global economic scene. And so people started wondering what's been going on over there for the past 20,000 years. And my dad started bringing these books over, and he brings over like the Art of War by Sun Tzu.
Mm-hmm.
And then I read through that, and one of the other things that I stumble upon is among Plato and Socrates and Descartes, Malcolm X, and Gandhi was the Tao Te Ching,
Mm-hmm.
So
Lao Tzu.
Yeah, exactly. So, and Confucius, and so I'm like, oh, okay, and then Buddha, and one of my favorite books as like a middle schooler, they like my dad gave me, was Siddhartha.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, oh, okay, so there's this really big world, but the only lineage I had learned of was, Thomas Jefferson, back to England, up through the Dark Ages, and then back to Rome, back to Greece.
Yeah.
And a little bit of Egypt, and there was like Alexander the Great,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't hear about why Genghis Khan, he was like a barbarian and all this stuff. So I started to find out, and I was like, oh, cool. So they have as much history in the East for the entire time there's been a lineage going on there that intersects and interweaves with the narratives from the West that has been told from a particular vantage point, let alone all the stories that have been erased from Africa, right?
Sure.
Um, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. So I grew up, did martial arts, and did karate and kempo and shotokan and jujitsu and a little bit of taekwondo, and then I got older and got into tai chi and realized that, oh, these were movements that were connected to like deep spiritual practices. It wasn't like for fighting.
Sure.
They like served that purpose as well.
Yeah.
But it's like martial arts. It's like these are the healing arts of the body, and I was like, oh, cool. And I happened to be a dancer at the same time, and so it made a lot of sense to me that the sensations in the body could be tied to spiritual experiences and philosophical ideas that would help govern life. And so I really became fascinated with the idea of integrating a lot of what I found to be a real appreciation for nature and a higher authority than like man's laws, so to speak, but also one that wasn't singular and supernatural and sentient, like a monotheistic viewpoint.
Yeah.
Whereas like I like the idea of distributed authority and you know, even like four corners and different explorations of what has led humans to be here. And so you know, a lot of it was just like mythology and just being curious about the stories.
Yeah. Wonder.
You know, wonder. So yeah, totally into that, and that's kind of how I found it. Very here, there. Studied some tantra and breathing, and was trying to hold my breath for long periods of time. It just like, you know, as an athlete and a dancer, I was looking for anything that I could to sort of improve my relationship to my body. And this gave me a whole different kind of access point to it, and so it was very valuable. I like this tea, this We Go High.
We Go High.
It also sounds like it sounds like Cantonese or something. We Go High. Or Korean, you know?
Possibly. I don't know. Actually, I would love to ask him why. So, as a side note, White2Tea, my tea sponsor, who gifted this tea for this purpose, to be, pun intended, steeped in conversation. I don't know why he named this tea, but he himself is an expat from Wisconsin. Is based permanently. He used to be based in southeast China, I think like sort of Fujian or like but now he's based in southwest China, which is like more where puerh, really it's like the birthplace of puerh, where it is from and where it continues to be, you know, grown and cultivated among like indigenous peoples within that region, but also like, you know, manufacturers and farmers that they work with, or so on and so forth. It's refreshing to hear that, like, you started, like, you got the books like because your dad brought them over, and then you pursued your own. You had this sort of like self inquiry that like it never starts or stops. It just kind of keeps going. I realize these are probably going to be totally melted, but they're going to be still really delicious. Because at room temperature, they're just going to be like, ugh. But
I know. I was like,
yeah.
it's not that hot.
yeah, but because it's like if it's at room temperature.
I mean, also,
or
I probably
thereabouts-
won't eat much more than this
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you
yeah,
want
yeah. I should probably get in there as well. Yeah, I made these with my daughter. It's a great activity to like get messy and make chocolate together, and
to. Totally.
just use like maple syrup and coconut palm sugar, and be like, I'm not worried if you eat 3 of these. Like, we'll be cool. Like, no
Mhm.
sugar spiking. Which is funny. That's a whole segue into like you asked me when you came in, like, how's my experience of parenting?
Mm-hmm.
But
Well, so the reason I asked that too is in this conversation of maturity and aging and wonder, my philosophy is that until we have kids, while we are kids, we're receiving the voices of our parents as the authority. And then once we become our adults, our executive functions become the parents to our inner child. And then once we have kids, my thinking is that we then externalize our inner child and treat our external children the way we've practiced treating our inner child.
that is our hope. That
Yeah.
is definitely like in a utopian sense, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's very. I love hearing that because, like, we need a lot more of that in the world. And my experience of parenting now, the shortest answer to your question is like, it's everything, every day, all the time, every moment is a work in progress, because the sometimes cognitive dissonance of my inner child dealing with my own childhood trauma with my parents, and then being triggered by something that I'm experiencing with my daughter, or with my partner. I don't want to say it's a minefield, because it's not exactly a minefield, but there's a lot of room there to be really kind to yourself, because otherwise, then when I look at, what our world is like, or what our culture is like here in the U.S. of A. Opioids, uppers, drugs, mood stabilizers, alcohol. These are all these sort of externalized ways to attempt to have a sense of control, instead of just dealing with your feelings. And honestly, this ongoing experience for 10 years now, and moving forward, of tea, you were talking about, martial arts. Gong Fu Cha is also, AKA Kung Fu tea. So, as you know, Kung Fu is not just martial art. It's skilled discipline, So, Gong Fu Cha, skilled discipline with tea preparation. A lot of nuance and micro movements, and just every moment to just ground yourself, be present in your body with what you're doing. This is my medicine, my teacher, my drug, all the things, like all wrapped in one, whenever I need it, or whatever whatever I need from it, or whatever I can give to it. It's all the things all at once, all the time.
Do you think that it gives you kind of feedback like a piano does, where you've done it you can notice an off note or something like
Sure.
that? How does that come up?
For me, it's more like a glitch in the matrix.
Mm-hmm.
I'll notice I'm like in the midst of, the because all the movements here are so cyclical, and all the stages of hot water to pot to decant to cup. It's like it's all the metaphors, within nature. Where does water come from? Well, there's rain, or there's snow, and it gets to the top of the mountain, and then during the spring it starts to melt, and it goes down into the stream, and from the stream into the river, and from the river, it's like there's all these. So there's a metaphor there with all those stages. When I'm unconsciously just trying to go through the cycles and the pattern of movement, and then I recognize like a glitch. I've like dropped something or splashed something or clinked on something. That's my sort of active reminder that like, oh, you know what? What's the whole point? There's no rush here. There's no destination. There's no like we must get 16 steepings out of this before 4 o'clock. It's just about slowing down or stopping. Stop, take a breath.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of thing. So. It's the most, other than music, playing music, playing percussion, playing bass. Those are like my main, voicings as a musician. This has been the best and most effective way for me to not turn my mind off, but to just really immerse.
Mm-hmm.
And to do that either totally solo here at home in the morning, or, in service to others, like in a ceremony with 16 people or something, or 5 people.
Do you approach it with kind of any kind of progressive viewpoint, or is it more of dropping in to a place each time and then coming back and visiting that place?
I feel like I'm not always trying to recreate it the same way. I'm always trying to have like a Zen mind, beginner's mind about it. Every time I set up somewhere new, it's the first time I'm doing it there. It's the first time I'm with this group of people. It's the first time I'm maybe using this new pot or setting it up in this particular way. Maybe I'm being more symmetrical or more asymmetrical. I'm always trying to get out of my own trance of habituation. So it's it's an ebb and flow. I guess it all boils down to like these sort of varying degrees of the performative qualities of it. I think I ultimately do this because it's not only a real kindness to myself, but it's just a kindness to others. And that's why I always come back to it, either on the daily or whenever the opportunity sort of arises. There were moments where I was trying to be more progressive with it, like when I was pitching this experience to potential clients, like, oh, this is a mindfulness module, for your team. It's a team. It's a team building experience. It's all these things. Like, in a way, noticing how I was trying to repackage it so that it could, like, you want this, it'll benefit you or your team or your company, or your culture, that kind of thing. I recently had, this past spring, a conversation with a friend, mentor, tea sister, just like an older sis to me. And she came over and we were sitting just like this, and she reminded me. She's like, you're selling this thing as though it's something that it's not. It's just tea. don't 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 sell it as though it's something else. I no wonder, it's like it's no surprise that, yeah, why would Snapchat or these other companies that may have, wellness budgets for their office, why would they seek this out when there's sort of like the go-tos, we'll bring in a yoga instructor or a meditation facilitator for like a thing. Don't don't steer away from the fact that this is exactly what it is, and it's really about finding comfort in community and in silence and connecting with yourself and connecting with nature, because it's really just leaves and water. Obviously the leaves go through an amazing, alchemical process through where it comes from, and then the farm, like what conditions it was grown in, and who are the farmers, who grew the trees, and who were the people who picked the leaves and who harvest, all the stages of how it got to even being in this cabinet, that she's like, let that speak for itself. You don't have to sell it as though it's a mindfulness thing. It's an understatement. So, yeah, that's a long-winded answer to the question of like, am I trying to be progressive with it? There were moments when I was trying to lean into that.
Yeah, I think about that all the time because, it's like we're in this world, right? There's Earth, but we're in the world, those are two different places. One is a physical place, which is Earth, and then it's the world, which is like society, and you know what I mean? Like the rules and police.
Yeah.
It's all constructed.
Yeah.
And things don't get to be one thing, really. They have to be two things. It's like tea, but then what? But why? Like, come on, dude. It's got to be...
What does this do? What will this do for me?
What will this do, right? And it's almost like the hack is to not hack, right? It's like, the whole life hack culture is like, life hack...
Or biohacking.
Biohack is just actually just breathe, chill out.
Or like what this guy with what's his name, Wim Hof, was like, just sit in cold water.
Yeah.
Just take a cold shower.
Yeah. That
may be the answer to your anxiety disorder, if you want to call it a disorder. Just take a fucking cold shower. Let your nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, go into fight or flight in a cold shower and like just breathe through it. And that may do wonders for you. Who knows?
Yep.
Granted, in the summertime, it's the easiest time to like embrace cold showers,
but also just ramen in the summer is good too.
So yeah, exactly. And drinking hot tea when it's hot and makes you sweat, cools you down.
Yeah, I think all that stuff is funny. I was watching the movie The Rock just came out with called Hobbs and Shaw, and I've read Nietzsche, and I got this quote from the movie because it was the right quote, and it says, "The body has more wisdom than all of your philosophies."
Sure.
As told by The Rock via Nietzsche. So it's like, one, I guess it's supposed to be ironic that quote came to me through The Rock in an action movie.
Yeah.
But
don't judge the book.
Exactly, but nonetheless, it's totally true. I believe it anyway, and it's almost like that's the part is where we've like we're just being in our bodies is almost terrifying.
Yeah.
So we try to be in our minds so much. And I think there is so much knowledge and wisdom in the body. I have some pain sometimes, and I always try to listen to it. It's like when we're in conversation with someone else, have you heard these things? We're like, lean into discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, yeah, also with your body.
Yeah.
Like when you're like, well, what is that? Why? There's, and if you notice, whenever we get a cut, we go to touch it first.
Yeah.
Or like, and you're like touching your foot.
Yeah.
And then if someone's like, oh, no, don't touch it.
Yeah.
But you want to touch the pain and like,
yeah.
Because you want to see like how sensitive it is and where it's sensitive.
Yeah.
You want to learn more, and that knowledge is intimacy, but it also hurts.
One of the best examples of what you're saying that I just experienced so in depth that it's blowing my mind right now, especially being altered by this tea slightly, is dental work. You're sitting in a chair. You can't see what's being done. You can hear only what the tools are doing.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
It's like...
You hear the zzz and the drills and the high frequencies. Maybe you'll smell the enamel being incinerated. I don't know. I mean, I just went through, like... talk about... Oh, man. Whoa. Talk about, like, childhood, working making peace with my inner child. I'd been neglecting dental... So here we go, full disclosure for a segue. I've been neglecting dental work for, like, too long as an adult, And then my body... Not my body. And then my tooth, my mouth was like, hey, motherfucker, we're going to do some shit, like, right now. Like, as I was flossing one night, like, in, like, early June. And it was the experience of, like, I'm flossing and, like, a part of my molar chips off is, like, a classic nightmare scenario where it's, like, you look in the mirror and your teeth are falling apart or something. It's like, okay, well, this is terrifying. But there was that immediate, like, where is the pain? Where is the discomfort? Oh, well, there isn't. There's discomfort because it's now a new shape that my inner mouth or my lip has to deal with. But there isn't, like, shooting sensitive tooth pain. It's a different, unique, nuanced experience. Then the process of how do I address this? Who do I go to? So that unfolded. I went from one general dentist who took 3 seconds, looked at it, he's like, just go get a fucking root canal. Here's a referral. Go deal with that. Come back. And let's do this, like, you have one more cavity that we should deal with before it turns into something terrible. I was like, okay, I don't really accept that diagnosis fully in this moment, so I'm going to go get a holistic dentist perspective. Got a totally different perspective, got a whimsically amazing recommendation for a different type of therapy called vital pulp therapy, as opposed to let's just go nuclear and do a fucking root canal. And even though it's been like a 2-month process and I'd been like in a dentist chair for 6 visits and like 8 weeks, it's done. And the whole experience of that with my inner child of, like, I remember being a 12-year-old boy and dealing with a root canal with, like, a very Russian endodontist who, like, jokingly was like, we're going to torture your mouth now with fire. And, like, it was a 6-hour, like, saga. Like, I remember it vividly in my body, like, this, the tension of that. And I was like, yeah, I don't want to do this shit. I'm not going to do it. And I was like, we have to do this because things will get worse if it's neglected. And so the experience of that was just, that cannot be really said fully in just this, in this story. But Yeah, God, it's so surreal to be in a dentist chair and to not have a sort of full view on what exactly is going on because of just the nature of the work, you just have to receive or trust the work of, the dentist, the hygienist, so on and so forth.
Mm.
Um, it's a really interesting trust exercise.
I think these stories are really really important. One, from the medical side, people recognize that there's alternatives
Yes.
to what is being offered. Even just me, I want to take care of my body, but I don't want to see a scientist.
Yeah.
Necessarily.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if I like science in the way that it's delivered on the body.
Yeah.
It's very invasive.
Yeah.
So I'd rather someone listen to my body and be in relationship with what they're experiencing, and then ask me what things feel like, and then come to some agreements and conclusions and processes that then maybe affect the rest of my life, or like you said, 6-8 weeks, whatever. As opposed to we're gonna drug you and drill you and drug you again, and it's gonna hurt, and
Bite down on this thing.
and bite down, and then shove a bunch of some foreign material in there that is also synthesized and
Yeah, wham bam.
Wham, bam.
Let's get you out and get the next person in.
So I think it's really important in that way. And I also, I think it is really, I think it's great that we have we can do a triple bypass on someone.
Yeah.
And add 20 years of their life. I think that's cool. I also just wish that we maybe arranged our society in such a way that that kind of thing was less common. Like the blending of the two practices. If you need a bypass, you need a bypass, maybe. But also, how do we notice it sooner, and what are the signs?
Yeah. I mean, this could maybe be, what's the word here? It's like when I've done some reading on how Eastern cultures deal with healthcare, right? Obviously, there's probably a lot more herbalism going on, right? Even just in the sort of the school of TCM, traditional Chinese medicine. There may be a lot of science to it, but there's also a lot of, I'd say, it sounds corny to say earth-based science, right? Just herbalism. You don't need a drug to deal with this ailment. You can just take, this herbal tonic, and it'll do the same thing, and the same thing that the chemical, combination would do, right? Without it being taxing on the body. But I feel like when
or like a hand thing for a migraine.
Yeah, exactly. It seems as though maybe not all Eastern cultures, but definitely some Eastern cultures, the focus is on health and well-being, and so when you're healthy is when you sort of pay your tidings. I'll pay because I'm healthy, because it's I don't know how that payment or that exchange would work. It's when you have the ailment or when you're sick that you need the care, and you receive the care for no fee. It's almost like a complete inversion of how we have it structured here. Of course, I mean, I'm no, expert on our healthcare system, but just imagine, like, yeah, as you say, to do less triple bypass surgeries just because, for the, due to the benefit of someone checking in with themselves, or maybe checking in on that pain and that
Well, yeah, I
part
mean,
of the
it could
body
just
that.
be, how do we help people manage stress?
Yeah. Or their feelings, that kind of thing.
Decrease the amount of cortisol that's being produced, and you have less strain on the
Oh.
nervous system
Yeah.
and the heart, and that's it for some people. Because then over a 20-year period, they're less likely to have issues.
Yeah.
And then you do that, and maybe cut back on the drinking a little bit, and watch the red meat.
Mm-hmm.
Just watch it.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. Don't have it all the time.
Yeah.
Have it 3 times a week and
Mhm.
not 5.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably it. With the other stuff, certain small interventions here and there in 3 or 4 different places in your life could be the difference between a bypass or a heart attack down the road.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I that's how I try to live my life anyway. I try
Yeah.
to say, I'm gonna watch my red meat. I'm gonna
Yeah.
watch it. I'm gonna decrease it. I would love to have a burger, delicious. I'm not vegan. Once a month.
Yeah.
Great, awesome. It also changes my relationship to it, in the sense that it becomes a precious delicacy
Exactly.
thing
Something you savor.
that I savor,
Yeah.
and that makes it even more fun.
Of course.
I'm like, oh,
Imagine how many more chemicals in the body and the mind enjoy that experience, that level of reverence and savoring. Maybe there's more enzymes or more. Maybe the microbiome is happier in that sense too.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We'll see. Who knows if any of this stuff
Yeah.
makes it better.
Yeah.
And also you can't go back. You can only go through.
Right.
It's not like we can undo technology or undo agriculture or whatever. I think it's just like, how can I, like, even with my business, I think, how can I be a effective salesman with grace?
Mm.
Maybe I sell less, and that's fine, but I sell enough.
And always redefining what enough is. Yeah. Given the
Yeah.
given the context. That's been the most interesting part of parenthood for me, is redefining what enough is. Because if I were single and had a different overhead and had a different set of needs altogether, enough would look a lot different than what it looks like right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that's what a lot of my wealth, I think, again, thinking about my body and like aging and stuff too, is like, I think there is a wealth to health where, if you have a strong back and a good heart, like that's beating, good cardiopulmonary health and a sound mind, then you're like infinitely wealthy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, you can't quantify what you could accomplish with those resources.
Mm-hmm.
Add some skills onto it, and you could do anything from, make some really beautiful fine art or something, to have a farm, whatever. Exponential, right? If you don't have those things, it becomes more challenging, and you have to be more of something else in order to make the same amount of, with the amount of time you have or whatever. And so to me, it's been interesting to like coming out of dance and like transitioning into writing more and being like, oh, okay, so now I'm using my brain more and my body less.
Yeah.
But I'm still informed by my body.
Yes.
Not that I'm like smarter now, or I don't know, but just what I'm using to like do my job.
Right.
And how that affects like my perception of the world is really interesting. And so like then this idea of growth and maturity is now become like a non-linear thing. It might be like, what does maturity look like today
Yeah.
or right now
Yeah.
for who I am today, right now, as opposed to a fixed definition of maturity that is supposed to stick with me regardless of who and what and where I go.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like open-ended questions because I feel like they're the most valuable for me to sit with and meditate on,
Mm-hmm.
because they just lead to new and different questions.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps me think, that helps me orient where I am in my thinking.
Exactly. And again, like there's no beginning or no end to any of the thoughts or the questions, really. It's just the moment, this moment in the here and now, like maintaining open-ended questions and leaving room for whatever's going to come up. How are you on time? Want to be sensitive to time?
I mean, I should probably be getting wherever
Yeah.
next
Yeah.
sun's gonna go down.
Yeah.
And I know you got stuff too.
Mm.
But I don't know, is there anything we missed? Do we feel good? I feel like that open-ended bit feels like a good
The
ending.
open-ended bit is a good coda in the here and now. I mean, for me, like having you in the here and now is wonderful, and I loved how it like kind of spontaneous. I mean, it was so spontaneous that I saw you walking outside of my window, which was arguably the fun, like the funniest and the most real thing I probably could have experienced today.
Mm-hmm.
So I thank you for that.
Yeah.
You know, the benefit of living by the town square here.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, like this is, you know,
And that's also why I walk.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like why I make practice of walking.
Yeah.
You know?
In fact, I want my next set, I want to have different setups because this is a really bulky thing that's typical to for this conversation, but I want like a walking setup. I want like a field recorder and like, you know, just use a field recorder and like just have it walk and talk. I mean, this show is called Wabi-sabi because I'm not trying for the first time in, you know, in terms of creativity, I'm really not trying to be perfect with something. Mm-hmm. So may this be like, you know, one in a series of conversations that I can have with you.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I want to give a big thanks to my tea sponsor, White2Tea.com, for the tea that we drink in conversation. It's called We Go High. I'll share a link to that in the description of this episode. Please go check out Citizens of Culture on Instagram and on the web citizensofculture.com to find out more information, as well as New2, that's spelled NOUSTOUS.co, and on Instagram as well, New2LA. Also, we'll be including a link to the Tao of Maceo, and follow him on Instagram as well at Maceo Paisley. And last but not least, please subscribe to the show. Leave a review. It helps with search results. Check out the Patreon that I'm running to generate funds to just run the show and to slowly grow it over time. The support tiers start as low as $1 a month. And there are gifts that I send annually to Patreon members starting at $5 a month. So check those out at patreon.com/Wabi-Sabi Podcast. Thanks again.